Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow. Okay. We'll be on the air, in about 3 minutes? Okay. Okay, let me take this right before the show. Good morning, Basil BuddhaCat Presents. May I help you? Okay, it is former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Okay, we'll chat for a moment, Governor Palin, but you could call back in during the show and talk about that. Okay, you're telling. Okay, go ahead. You know we've got Chief Justice John Roberts' housecat, Deadpan, on. So that's going to be part of our conversation this morning. He stayed with us. He declined a ride back home, somehow attached to a limousine, by Mitt Romney. Okay. Former Governor Palin is telling me that she is going to send a wounded and very angry Kodiak bear to Chief Justice John Roberts' home. First of all, to take care of Deadpan, and secondly, says she just hopes that Chief Justice John Roberts has a pretty good set of claws himself. Okay. We'll try to talk to you during the show, okay? Thanks for calling. Okay. All right. Good morning. Welcome to Basil BuddhaCat Presents. My name is David Stevenson. I'm Basil's co-host, interpreter, and chief gopher. In center slot, we have Basil BuddhaCat himself. And Basil has the microphone on. It's tuned really low, and I have a little device in my ear, so he's actually just talking to me through his microphone, so I can hear him a little bit better. He says it doesn't bother him very much. He's been working that ear out, working it out really hard in advance of shows, and the microphone doesn't bother him one single bit. And we have again as our guest Deadpan, Chief Justice John Roberts' housecat. And as you recall, Deadpan came on a few weeks ago and talked to us about the Supreme Court decision about the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and explained to us why Chief Justice John Roberts voted the way he did on the bill, much to the chagrin of many right-wingers who are very perturbed at Deadpan's human, Chief Justice John Roberts. But he gave a fairly cogent explanation, and it seemed to make sense to some people that watched the show and called in and wrote in about it afterwards. And he explained that Chief Justice John Roberts was concerned that if the Supreme Court struck down the portion of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, that spoke about Congress having the ability to pass such a law, he was concerned that overriding Congress's ability to tax and to regulate would have opened the floodgates for lawsuits from people saying that if Congress did not have the right to make them become part of and buy into and participate in health care, then how in the world did Congress have the right to impose perhaps any tax, but certainly how in the world did they have the right to tell people that they had to pay out of their salary into Social Security and Medicare? Furthermore, he was concerned that if Congress's ability to tax and regulate were challengeable, then why not take it to the next level and say, why in the world could states be allowed the right to the ability to force people to get automobile insurance. And that seemed to make sense to many of the constitutional scholars which contacted us and spoke to Basil. Seemed to make sense to all of the cats that Basil has received commentary from. So it seemed to make sense that would be a fairly cogent reason why Chief Justice Roberts would rule as he did with the majority, that Congress, in fact, did have the right to pass a bill mandating that people buy into health insurance. Now, the thing that Basil and I were concerned about, and going back to the whole issue back in 2009 when the Congress began discussing health insurance and the whole concept of people becoming part of health insurance coverage, as there are, at that point, well over 50 million people who in fact have no health care coverage, many of them because they have pre-existing conditions that insurance companies deem them uninsurable for. And that was one of the things that will come into play as the law evolves, as it comes into play. It didn't come into play immediately, but insurance companies will not have the ability to deny people coverage based on pre-existing conditions. And that we thought was fairly important. That solved one of the urgent issues of America's health care dilemma. Because if people don't have health care and have an emergency, heart attack, stroke, any of a number of things that befall people, cancer, they'll show up at the emergency room. And in fact, the emergency room is the most expensive way to treat illness. Hospitals charge exorbitant fees for people coming to the emergency room, and because people are unable to pay the hospitals, they'll either lose their house, they'll have their wages tapped, they'll have to declare bankruptcy to get rid of the debt, which they quite often do because the hospital bills are so cumbersome, so many tens of thousands of dollars for a very brief stay in the hospital. But at any rate, so hospitals pass that along, first of all, to their patients who can pay. So it adds costs to all of our health care coverage, either by dint of us paying or out of pocket at the emergency room, or being what, Basil? Basil says I'm going on too long. At any rate, a lot of problems that were evolving out of our health care coverage, the least of which, Basil says, not in a cat's whisker, the least of which, not the least of which, the most important thing is that America's health care coverage is the most expensive in the entire world. People pay more money for health care coverage, either through their insurance or through the costs in hospitals and with doctors, more for health care coverage than any country in the world. And, okay, he says that's probably about, averages about $7,000 a year per American. And in fact, other nations that have greater longevity of life, greater lifespan, healthier individuals, lower infant mortality rates, that are superior to America in every measurable way in terms of health. They pay no more than about $3,000 per year per individual in those countries. Now, Basil has immigration, as the fact that we have quite a few, I don't know whether you want to call them illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, has that had an effect on that? Basil says he's done a lot of reading on that because he thinks that that deserves some looking into. And he found that, in fact, immigrants, on average, are healthier, younger, sturdier, healthier than the average American already living here. They're less likely to get sick. They're just tougher. They're like immigrants have been throughout the history of America. They come to America, they have a lot to offer, they work hard, and deserve their due. Okay, so they don't really add anything substantial to the equation. Basil says that, in fact, hold on, Basil wants me to quote him first, and then interpret for the audience. Okay? Meow. Okay. Now I'll translate. Basil says that, in fact, immigrants add a tremendous amount to America and avail themselves of less health care coverage. They're younger, they're healthier, they're sturdier. And just like immigrants that have come here throughout the history of the United States of America, they add a tremendous amount. They go ahead, they work very hard, they strive to learn the language, they want to become Americans ultimately. They're frustrated by the fact that it can take decades going through all the hoops that immigrants have to go through to become American citizens. They in fact add a tremendous amount to our culture. And being bilingual, as Basil will attest to, being bilingual, you really gain an awful lot, Basil says. Okay. Do you want to delve back into the Seinfeld episodes? We've spent some time last night. We had your Basil's picks a couple of weeks ago. And you want to go into that anymore? Basil says, not really. He says, except to note one more time that Newman is, in fact, the one on the show that Basil can most liken to, he can most identify with. Because Newman, as you recall from watching the show, if you did, Newman was a postal worker. He was quite dedicated to the concept of not showing up for work if it was raining, and not showing up for work if it were snowing, not showing up for work if it were too windy out that day, not showing up for work if it was too gosh darn sunny and pretty out to waste a day at work. So you think Newman, in fact, probably would have been a pretty good cat then, huh, Basil? Basil says, as humans go, none of you deserve to even be considered as qualified to be a cat. But, having said that, says, Newman is, with a couple of decades of practice, he might be able to be a pretty good cat. He's got some of the rudimentary skills involved in it. So maybe Basil gives him a definite possible for making a good cat. Okay. Deadpan, do you have anything you want to add in? I mean, we spoke at length when you were here a few weeks ago, talking about your humans vote on the Affordable Care Act that came before the Supreme Court. Deadpan says, he's a man without a country. He's a cat without a country. He's looking to emigrate somewhere where Chief Justice John Roberts can't find him. Now, it's pretty hard to escape the long arm of the law, Deadpan. No, he went back to sleep. He's taking a cat nap. Okay. Okay. Basil BuddhaCat Presents. Good morning. Tweety check to see if this matches up with the number that a certain sheriff from Arizona called in off of recently. Okay. Okay. In the interim, while Tweety's checking, Tweety says, "Yep." Tweety says, "It is. It is Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio." Okay, Sheriff Arpaio. Good morning. Basil says he will let you weigh in on Seinfeld. No, we're in a little negotiating process here. Sheriff Joe Arpaio says that he wants to weigh in on the subject of Deadpan and his human, Chief Justice John Roberts. Okay? Okay, Basil, is that? Yeah, Basil says that's okay. He'll give him a little time. Okay, go ahead, Chief Justice Arpaio. Okay, Joe Arpaio, and I can hear the bullwhip cracking in the background, is saying that he's actually gone out and bought a few more bullwhips. He says he's got one in cat size. He's got one that he's had engraved, okay, not with Robert's Rules of Order, but Robert's Rules of Submission to the decent and human American folks. Okay? Says he's also got one with a catcher's mitt attached that he's going to see if he can do something with Mitt Romney, who, as governor of Massachusetts, signed into law a bill which became, to a great degree, a model for the Affordable Care Act. Probably was a little bit stronger in terms of coverage. Massachusetts, the vast majority of people in Massachusetts. Now, Massachusetts had pretty good coverage in terms of numbers of people living there covered by health insurance plans before this bill went into effect. But this bill brought the vast majority of those who were not covered by health insurance. It brought them into the health insurance plan. It expected that the employers would provide health insurance. It had penalties for employers that did not provide health insurance. It had penalties for those who felt like they didn't need health insurance because they were healthy, didn't care about routine checkups. They figured they could go it alone. Sheriff Arpaio, isn't it pretty accurate to say that that the reason why we have insurance is so that you spread the risk and the cost out amongst a large population? I mean, when Medicare negotiates for medication prescriptions for folks covered by Medicare and for coverage from Medicare, they have that power to do that simply because they've got a lot of folks that they've got covered under Medicare. And in fact, don't HMOs have the same benefit of being able to tell doctors how much they're willing to pay them? Okay, and tell hospitals how much they're willing to pay them. Buy pharmaceuticals in bulk so they get them for a lower cost. Isn't that basically the same thing? Oh, with a crack of the whip, he hung up. Okay. Basil, I think we've opened up a real can of worms here. Basil says, see if we can get some birds to dive in on those worms. Okay. Basil, is there any more you'd like to talk about as far as Seinfeld goes, or any movies? Okay, Basil says no more Seinfeld. Enough. Enough. He's had it. But there's a movie we watched the other night that Basil wants to talk about. The movie is called Vantage Point. Vantage Point involves a meeting in Spain, an outdoor meeting between the American president at the time and the mayor of Salamanca, Spain, or as the Spanish call it, España. Okay, the meeting is brought to order with heads of state from all over the world in order to deal with the subject of terrorism. And at this outdoor event, something bad happens. Basil doesn't want to go into detail about what happens, but the important thing about the movie is the way it's narrated out, so to speak. It actually shows the same about 20 minutes of events from the vantage point of 8 different people involved in those events. And Basil thinks it's well worth a look-see simply because it delves into some political issues. It questions the notion of who are the real terrorists, because at the meeting there are folks that are making their point that they feel that America is perhaps, and by dint of that, the president at the time is perhaps the world's number one. I don't expect any calls on this phone. Hold on. Okay. Good morning, Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I didn't expect any calls on this line. Basil? Okay. It's another cat, and he won't identify himself, but he's got a very chirpy voice, and I really wonder, is this Walter? There was a little giggle there. Okay, Mystery Cat, do you have any questions, any comments about what we're discussing this morning? Okay, Walter says, okay, yep, yep, he says obviously he saw the movie too. He liked it. See, I told you, chirp. He says he liked the movie too. He doesn't like it as much as the movies we showed and talked about. Movies we talked about the other night. The Cloverfield. Nah. He particularly didn't like it nearly as much as Godzilla. But at any rate, okay, but thank you for calling. Thank you for calling and weighing in on this. Okay, thanks. Enjoy your day. Okay. So go on, Basil. Basil's saying that he really, first of all, doesn't appreciate call-ins from other cats that should talk about what they're going to call in with him prior to calling in. Okay. Basil says he. Do you want me to translate directly? Okay, go ahead. Okay. Here we go. This is in cat. Okay, and now I'll translate into English for you folks that don't speak cat yet. Goofy cat, and I think he's talking about our caller in. Yes, he is. Okay, is that who you were talking about? Yeah, just a nod of the head and a flick of the ear. Okay, now, vantage point. Anything about that movie that struck you as being Okay, Basil's saying he really likes the fact that the movie shows the chain of events from the perspective of 8 different characters in the movie. Of course, they're not only seeing it from different vantage points, but they're seeing it through the prism of their own beliefs and their own concerns. And he thinks that almost gives him the notion that humans have the ability to rise to the occasion, and shows a little bit of civility, a little bit of brightness, not just intelligence, but brightness. No, still not cats. In fact, he's seen movies with cats in it that had the chain of events looked at by one cat from 8 different perspectives. The cat, of course, wants to save the 9th perspective for the last life. Okay, and with that, we're going to have to wrap up our show. This has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I'm David Stevenson, Basil's co-host, interpreter, and chief gopher. Basil BuddhaCat in center slot. And with us briefly, although he's pretty much either catnapping or in a trance, Deadpan. Chief Justice John Roberts, housecat. Enjoy your day. They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, on Wall Street. Fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street. And Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, on Wall Street. Meow.